Cats. How you doing? Today we're going to talk about sheet music a little bit and its history, and also specifically about tempo. And so what I want to start with is sheet music has been around since the writing down of music has been around since, as we know of, about 2,600 years ago, 600 BC or so. The ancient Greeks decided, hey, when we're doing all of our shows and our beautiful amphitheaters that we built, we want to be able to do the music the same way each time. So let's try writing it down. And so they used really elaborate symbols and things, and it turns out it wasn't as easy to follow as people might think. But it was the best they had, and they kept it going for a really long time. And then some new cultures came in. You had some Persian influence with some writing, some ideas about how to write. And then you had the Europeans come in, and they, some Benedictine monks who loved chanting, Gregorian chants, man, they loved it. But they wanted to be able to do the same song from mass to mass to mass. That's their religious service. So they decided that, yeah, maybe we should have a better form of writing this down. Now, chants were pretty much up and down pretty easily pitch-wise. They weren't making a whole lot of leaps. So they kind of created this little way of notating it. Very pretty, looks a lot like our sheet music today. There's some really good examples of it online in what are called illuminated manuscripts. That's where it's beautiful. There's sort of artwork in there amongst the musical notes. And the writing style is just gorgeous. So if you want to look those up, I might give you a link to look at something like that. So those were, about the year 1033. That was about 1,000 years ago, right? That's when they started thinking, hey, there's a better way to do this. Let's try something smarter. So they started naming the pitches. A particular monk decided that he would take an existing hymn, that's a religious song, and he was going to take each one of the lines, each one of the measures, and he was going to take the first word of each one of those measures, and in some cases, the first letter of two words together. But anyway, he decided to put just two letters from each of those and call that pitch. So that's where we get the song from The Sound of Music, Do a Deer. Do a deer, a female deer, ray, a drop of golden sun. I'll put a link to that for you so you can see it. Those notes are called do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. Now the ti and the do used to be different things. The original do was ut, which they decided wasn't very singable. So they changed it to do based on, they're not sure whether it was based on a certain monk's name or just domini, which is a Latin word. So D-O for domini. And then T changed somewhere in there, not sure exactly where or why, but it used to be C and it was changed to T. Then later on, we decided to name all of those letters so it'd be easier for notation. Two letters is harder than a letter. So they're named A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and that's based on Western alphabet. So what that would look like in Russian would be a little bit different, or in some other language. But for English speakers, it's A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And those pitches, those notes are set onto the sheet music being divided up by measures. And those measures have a time signature. Now, I'm not going to go into that very much today because we're mostly talking about tempo, which is different. But just bear in mind that that does play a part. And in a way, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about time signature at the end of the lesson today. But the tempo of a song, that started coming into play much later than that. Kick it up another 800 years, and you've got this brilliant musical mind named Ludwig von Beethoven in Germany. Now, another gentleman just around that time created a brand new device called a metronome. And the metronome is based on a pendulum. And the pendulum moves based on a weight. So you crank it up, it's called mechanical. You crank it up, make these little gears go, and then you set this little weight on this stick. And it's all set in sort of a little obelisk, like a triangle thing. And this little stick comes up, and this little weight is on the stick. And depending on where you move the weight, there's all these little dashes along there. And each one of those dashes represents how many beats per minute this thing is going to tick at. So if you put the weight down low, it's going to tick fast. So it'll go tick, 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 tick. That would be a lot of beats per minute. Then you can slide it up. The higher it goes, the slower it moves. So now it's going tick, 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 tick. So that's a lot fewer beats per minute. Now, they decided to come up with names for about, a whole bunch of those. And so that you, when you're looking at the metronome and you're deciding how fast you want to play a piece of music, that's what tempo means, is speed, speed, how fast or how slow, tempo. So they decided, well, I'm going to set this metronome for this many beats per minute, and then I'm going to play this song at that speed. It's a really great way to learn how to play an instrument or to learn a dance. So I'm going to tell you about that in a second. So Ludwig van Beethoven took this neat new things, brand new technology, and took it and decided, I'm going to write my music and set it to that. So he took some old pieces of music that he already had, and he added those time signatures. So now, not only when someone played his music, did they know what the pitches should be, and they knew what the measure should be, and they knew what the time signature should be. Now they would also know what the tempo should be. And that's so important, because when you're playing a piece of music, if you don't know how fast it should go, then you don't really understand the piece of music very well. Changes the complete feel of it. So for example, if we were going to sing something like Row, Row, Row Your Boat, which you all know, and we were going to do it at a very slow tempo, which might be called something like Adagio, which in direct translation in Italian means laid back or kick back. Adagio, taking it easy. That's what that means. So Adagio might be really slow. So I might say, if this were my Adagio pace, and I would have the actual beats per minute on that if I had an actual metronome in front of me right now, then I would say that it would go row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Okay? Now, if I were to take that same piece and I were to speed it up, and there's a nice one called allegro, and we use both of those terms, adagio and allegro, in ballet and dance all the time. Those are two real common ones. Now, whether or not we're actually performing those dances at an adagio pace based on the metronome or an allegro pace based on the metronome, it isn't a real direct correlation. And even in sheet music, the metronome is considered a jumping off point. So it's not supposed to be terribly specific, but it's an idea, okay? And each conductor can maybe change a little bit how they're playing things as well, based on how they want it to feel. So if I were gonna go allegro with Row, Row, Row Your Boat, let's try that. Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. So see, it's a much brighter, happier pace, right? So that's where tempo takes you, is from something slow and lethargic. There's a good word for that in there as well. And to something that's bright and happy and full of life. So the same thing happens when we're dancing. So when we dance and I teach you a step, I might teach you some arm movements, say that we're just gonna wave our hands in the air or wave our hands by our face. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So when I first teach it to you, I wanna teach it to you slowly so that you can get it. So I'm gonna slow the tempo way down. I would say 5, 6, oh, slow way down. 5, 6, 7, 8. Wave, 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 wave. Okay? If we get it and we understand the step and we all know it and it's getting good, then I'm going to speed it up. I'm going to speed up the tempo. So I would say 5, 6, 7, 8. Wave, 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 wave. Right? So the great thing about teaching like that is that the tempo suits you. Now, what if we're trying to put it to a specific piece of music that's already recorded? Then I've got to get you up to that tempo. So for my older kids right now, we're doing Thunderstruck, and that piece of music is so fast with so many beats per minute that it's really hard to do dance steps that are right up to the pace of a quarter note on that one. Now, something happens in particularly tap dancing that I want you to know about, and that's when we're counting our rhythms. That means how many beats are inside of each one of those measures, and we're going to talk about that more next week, time signatures and measures. But let's just for right now say that we're playing with some music that's in common time. Common time is so common that it's actually called common time. And that means 4 quarter note beats per measure. So when I'm counting music to you, I'm counting it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now why don't I count it 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4? If I were conducting an orchestra, I would. But as a dance person, we've found out that most Western music, for whatever reason, is not just in measures, it's also in something called a phrase. And that phrase is usually 2 measures at a time. It can alter, but that's what's pleasing to our ears for popular music. Classical, not so much, but popular music, songs that you sing, tend to be arranged so that there's 2 measures together that create a phrase. And when you're listening to them, as you develop what's called your ear for music, you will start hearing it naturally. So you'll see me in class, sometimes I'll stop and wait for a second, and I'll say 5, 6, 7, 8, and then if I'm wrong, or if you're not ready to go, I'll have to stop, and I'll wait another measure, and then I'll say 5, 6, 7, 8 again. I can't just do it on any measure. And also you can hear when the measures start too, when you start listening to music a lot. Well, you'd think, well, couldn't there be a one, and could you start anywhere? No. So next week we're going to talk more about that. I'm going to play certain pieces of music for you, and I'm going to help you hear where the 1s and the 5s are, so that when you're listening to the music, you understand where the phrases are. So when you start writing your music, you'll know how to make a phrase. Okay? So what happens inside of those when I'm counting them for you as a dancer, there's something else I want to talk about, and that's rhythm. We'll talk about accents next week. But for right now, I want to talk about a little bit about rhythm. So there's tempo, but there's rhythm. So inside of a tempo and inside of a measure, you can have a rhythm in there. So you might have, this is the tempo, say, but the rhythm is buddy yada buddy yada buddy yada buddy yada. Okay? So, or you can have a rhythm, if this is the tempo, bump bada bump, bump bada bump. Right? You can have any sort of rhythm inside there that you want, and it could vary on each measure. But there are certain kinds of rhythms that are common, and those kinds of rhythms are different kinds of dances. So we're going to talk about that later too. But for right now, I want to tell you how you might count something like that when you're dancing. So like sometimes you might hear me say 1 and a 2, or and a 1, or and 1 and 2. That means that normally the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, those are all quarter notes. So those are all based on those beats per minute. So those quarter notes are what I'm counting to you. But if I have more dance steps than 4 in a measure, more dance steps than 8 in a phrase, then I gotta count them somehow, right? So if I do some arm movements and I go 1, 2, 3, and 4. If I go like that, if I got a measure and I'm going boom, 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 I'm not going to count it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 because the measure doesn't have 5 counts. The measure only has 4 counts. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. I add an and in there. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay? So that's where you hear those ands. Now, if I'm a tap dancer and I'm doing really complicated little footwork, then I might count that a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E. or a 1 and a 2, 3, 4, 5. They're just all gonna I'll add extra little syllables for each one of those little beats that we're gonna do. 1 and a 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3 and a 4. So I'm gonna add in those little extra things. And what you would do with the written sheet music on that is you would have 8th notes and 16th notes. You'd have a lot of extra different sizes of notes in there. Well, I can't tell you that this is going to be on an 8th note. That doesn't make any sense as a dancer, but I could tell you that it's on an and. Or I could tell you that my first step on this dance, my first step here, we're going to start on an and. So what that means is I'm going to start even before the 1. So I'm going to go and 1, and 1. Okay? So I'm going to start it right before the 1 even happens. Okay, so that's what ands are when I'm telling them to you when we're dancing. So what I'd like you to do is think of the dance steps we've already done and see if you can figure out how to count them on your own. So you could go back and look at some old tapes and try counting them, or listen to the way I count them. See if I'm counting the ands for you, or if I'm just dancing the ands for you, and see if you can count the ands. And I also want you to try listening to some of your favorite music and try singing it out loud. Like I said, some of the songs you've already sung in our shows and things. Try singing them completely at a different tempo and see what that does for you. See if that makes you feel better about it. See if it makes you feel happier about it, makes you feel a little sadder about it. Okay? And also I'd like for you to watch, I want you to watch the link that I gave you a couple weeks ago for Moses Supposes. And I want you to watch the tap steps and see if you can count them in your head. See how many N's and how many E's and how many U's there are in there. There's a lot, okay? And that's it for this week. That's tempo, okay? Next week we're gonna do some more stuff about sheet music. Yay, okay?